Melissa Melton here with Aaron Dykes for True Stream Media.
We're here all right, and this stuff has to stop somewhere.
We're really mad. We just came across this, but apparently it was published on July 23rd. Another win for Monsanto. U.S. raises allowable levels of company's pesticide in crops. Check this out. The EPA is getting ready to set new standards, and the amount of allowable glyphosate in oilseed crops such as flax, soybeans, and canola is going to be doubled from 20 parts per million to 40 parts per million, which GM Watch points out is over 100,000 times the amount needed to induce breast cancer cells. But additionally, the EPA is increasing limits on allowable glyphosate in food crops from 200 parts per million to 6,000 parts per million. 6,000!
That is a 3,000% increase. That's more than 30 times the allowable amount of glyphosate. It's incredible. And glyphosate, of course, is the main component of Roundup, Monsanto's big herbicide, and it's the main thing that GMO crops are engineered to resist. So they douse all the crops in just gobbles of Roundup and this...
pouring it on.
Oh, and they're engineered to resist it, so more and more and more gets used, goes into your system, into the environment, into the ecosystem. Instead of addressing any of the problems that are surely arising, they're just raising the safe levels. It's the exact pattern we saw with Fukushima, where once the radiation started to be noticed en masse, they decided to raise the acceptable radiation standards, first there in Japan, then in the United States through the EPA.
Yeah. And this is the same month that all of this other stuff is coming out. I'm just going to run through this really quick. A new study has just come out to show that pesticides can cause Parkinson's disease because they inhibit a biochemical pathway that normally protects the neurons in the brain. There's also this new study that just got released. This is a news release from the USGS. Pesticide is accumulating in Sierra Nevada frogs, and it continues to be a suspected factor in the decline of amphibian species across the U.S. and the world. Another new study. This is another one on top of all the other ones that have shown that colony collapse disorder has also been linked to pesticides because it's suspected out of 35 pesticides, some at lethal levels they found in pollen collected from bees servicing major food crops in 5 states, including California, according to this study, and that's food that we eat. And that's going to continue, and we've reported on this before at True Stream Media, because Monsanto, when the leading bee research firm came out and linked Monsanto glyphosate to colony collapse disorder, they just went out and bought the bee research firm, and it happens to be the same one the USDA recognizes as one of the foremost research firms in the world. And so when they go to get more research to find out why bees are dying, they're going to be getting it from the leading bee research firm, now owned by Monsanto.
And obviously research is the first line of defense and watchdogging against the activities. So when they buy up research, for obvious reasons, that's hugely unethical and puts us all at danger, folks.
Big time. This also just came out in the same month. 100% of children in this study out of University of California, there were 364 children, some preschoolers, some adults, and some other teens or something. They did 100% of children in this study were found to be exposed to excessive arsenic, dioxins, and pesticides in this study. That was 100%. That was over the cancer benchmarks for those items in their diets. Okay? And why is this going on? Here's one reason. We have so many people that have worked for our government that also have worked for the EPA, and it's like a big revolving door. Here's a list. We got Michael Taylor, who's our food safety czar. He's also been a lawyer for Monsanto, a lobbyist for Monsanto. Wasn't he vice president of something at one point? We've got William Ruckelshaus. This guy, he was the first head of the EPA.
Under Nixon.
Right. And then he was on the board of directors for Monsanto for 12 years and went back to the EPA. And we don't know during that time when
it may have been concurrently.
It could have overlapped.
And today he's very closely connected with the Bill Gates family and has a initiative for global development with Bill Gates' father, William Gates Sr. So
and they're a huge pusher of GMO, big time. And then we've got this lady, Linda Fisher. She was served for 10 years as the assistant administrator of the EPA's Office of Pollution Prevention, Pesticides, and Toxic Substances, then turned right around and became vice president of government and public affairs, heading up Monsanto's Washington lobbying operation before returning back to the second in command at the EPA under George W. Bush. And now she's currently vice president of Safety, Health, and Environment and chief sustainability officer of DuPont. So when we have that going on, Of course we're going to have stories like this coming out. And here's what they said about this. There are even more studies that have come out. There's another study that said glyphosate exerted proliferative effects in human hormone-dependent breast cancer. Another study in April said glyphosate enhances the damaging effects of other foodborne chemical residues. It's a chemical synergy, and it compounds and environmental toxins. Here's another study out of MIT that was independent that said negative impact on the body is insidious and manifests slowly over time as inflammation damages cellular systems throughout the body. Consequences of most of the diseases and conditions associated with a Western diet that include gastrointestinal disorders, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, depression, autism, infertility, cancer, and Alzheimer's disease.
It's inflaming, if not triggering, all these conditions.
It just keeps going on. Then you've got Don Huber, Professor Emeritus, Plant Pathology at Purdue, saying in another study, glyphosate draws the vital nutrients out of living things and removes most of the nutritional value coming from these GMO foods, if there were any to begin with.
The GMO foods meant to feed the world are nutritionally void. They're worthless. They're just empty calories, and they're going to use them to push around how they fed the world, and they're not going to actually be sustaining anyone's health or their body.
But now, in spite of all of these independent studies, all of this stuff that's coming out that shows it's bad, that shows it's hurting the environment, that shows it's making children sick, that shows that it's making people sick, they're going to go ahead and raise it from 200 parts per million in food crops to 6,000. It is amazing. It's disgusting.
And our shady practices are being taught to other countries around the world as they learn development, American style, to douse everything in these pesticide chemicals. There's going to be a tipping point with this at some point. We've got to stop them. We've got to continue the resistance. We know that we're hurting them by speaking out against GMOs. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing so many propaganda points popping up. And we're going to analyze some more coming up in the days ahead. But they are really freaked out, and they're on the offensive, but trying to convince people this is the way to feed the world. Obviously, it's not.
God, this makes me sick. Anyway, that's all for now. True Stream Media.